everyone, I'm Ivy Casao from BSTM 1102 and I'm here to discuss you about eliminating hazard and risk on hospitality industry. But before that, let us first know what is the differences about the hazard and the risk. So the hazard is something that can cause harm: electricity, chemicals, working up a ladder, noise, a keyboard, a bully at work, stress, and many more. While the risk is the chance, high or low, that any hazard will actually cause somebody harm. There's more. Let us know more about the hazard and risk.
Hello. In this session, I want to just dispel a couple of things around the safety area. And what I want to do is to talk about the difference between a hazard and a risk. Now, what I'm seeing at the moment is many organisations struggling with the difference. So we identify a hazard and we think because that hazard is quite large that we need to do something about it. Well, that's not entirely true because the hazard in itself is not the risk. In terms of safety, a safety risk is the hazard times the exposure. So you could actually have a very large hazard with very little to no exposure and it brings the risk level down. Conversely, you could have a relatively small hazard, but it has huge exposure to it, which might raise the risk level to that. So in terms of our safety risk management, the first thing that we need to do is identify the hazard, absolutely. But then we need to think about what is the exposure to that risk. Therefore, what is the likelihood of the harm? Now, what we also need to understand is the fact that just identifying a hazard isn't the risk itself. So I'll give you an example. We might have exposed wiring in a kitchen. That's a hazard. The risk is electric shock to a visitor or a member of staff from exposed wiring in the kitchen. So we have actually taken the hazard and we've put it into an event where we've got a thing, a hazard, in this case the exposed wiring, and we've turned it into an event that somebody gets an electric shock or worse still, gets electrocuted from that exposed wiring. Once we've identified that risk, then we just treat it the same way as any other risk. What is the likelihood of that person having that electric shock or getting that electric shock? Well, it depends on the exposure. So the likelihood is going to be determined by the exposure that you've got. And what current controls do you have in place? As we've talked about before. What would be the consequences if somebody did touch the exposed wiring? You're probably ending up with an electric shock and worst case, as I said, probably having an electrocution. So the lesson to come out of this particular session is not so much about making sure that you go around and identify hazards. We tend to be quite good at identifying hazards, but what I wanted to sort of talk about was don't just take the hazard as the risk. We need to turn that hazard into a risk event, and that way we then manage that risk accordingly. All right, hopefully that allows you to have a discussion with your safety people to say, well, yes, that's a hazard, but our exposure isn't that great. So why are we going and treating this and trying to eliminate this when potentially there are other things that we could do? That's all I've got for this session, and given the safety side of this particular message, then obviously it adds to what my normal sign-off is, which is let's be careful out.
So, alright, I guess you have the idea about the hazard and risk. So here are some tips about food preventing hazard.
Food hazards are not always related to the food itself and often are a result of poor handling of food and beverages as well as unclean food contact surfaces. As food handlers, we prevent food hazards by following hygienic work practices. These include personal hygiene, avoiding contamination from personal health issues, environmental hygiene and other work practices. We must always remember to take all appropriate control measures to eliminate or minimize any hazards along with their associated risks. HACCP is a food safety program that is used as a method to control food hazards and ensure food safety. HACCP does not replace hygienic work practices. It is a system used that allows the kitchen brigade to identify and monitor predetermined food safety hazards. We will look closer at this in the classroom.
So, of course, we all have known that the hospitality industry, whose main duty is serving and preparing food for the people or for their customers. So, of course, they have to be clean and peace on the kitchen to prevent and eliminate the hazard and risk. And here are some clips or videos that can help you to eliminate the hazard and risk.
We deal with a lot of heat, so burns and slips. The next one would probably be spillages. So obviously it's quite a wet, environment. We do roast our own coffee, so we do a lot of manual handling. We move quite large volumes, tons of coffee a week, so really it's just trip hazards. Customers leaving things in odd spots obviously is a big one, so people will leave their bag maybe at the bottom of the table. So we've got a couple of steps within the cafe, and we've got some, some tape on that, some yellow tape. I think just anytime you deal with a high volume of people, you're going to be presented with some risks that are, not prepared for. It is quite a fast-paced environment, which tends to mean that you're quite aware of what's around you at the time. But the repetitiveness of making 1,000 coffees a day, the biggest thing that we notice is RSI and baristas getting injuries within their wrists and stuff. So it's more or less just rotating them in and out of those positions to make sure that they're not doing that same motion day in, day out every single day. Your number one hazard, I would say, in any workplace is the people you're working with and knowing where they are and around them. I think if you go into any bar or cafe, you'll notice everyone sets backs as they walk behind you. A big hazard anywhere is people just not alerting you to their presence, I guess, and you turn around and you've got a bunch of hot coffees and you walk into them. I guess the main thing here is, so it would be don't stop and communicate. Make sure you're talking to the people around you. October is National Safe Work Month. Visit the website to find out how you can get involved. Safety is everyone's business, and your knowledge and experiences are worth sharing.
See how many hazards you can spot in this walkthrough. Did you catch them all? Let's back up and see if we can do it safer this time. That looks like a tripping hazard. Better put it back where it belongs. Dish towels aren't much protection from a hot pan. Oven mitts are a safer bet. Let's clean this up before someone slips and falls. Ouch! What's a sharp knife doing in this open drawer? A step stool is more stable for reaching a high shelf. Let's store this knife on a rack where it can't hurt anyone. Always clean up spills as soon as they happen.
Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned some ideas on how to eliminate the hazard and risks for the hospitality industry.